Hi, I'm Billy Shore. My guest today is Dan Barber from Blue Hill at Stone Barns.
This is the moment to fight back. Many ways to do that are quiet, and for one way is as Michael Pollan has said, you vote with your fork 3 times a day, and that's exactly right. It's a very powerful vote, and we all need to stand up in the middle of this moment to protect and defend what we've built.
Hi, I'm Billy Shore. Welcome back to Add Passion and Stir. It's our weekly conversation about food and passion and making a difference in the world. And what a time in our world today to be having this conversation. And we couldn't be having it with anybody better than Dan Barber, the chef at Blue Hill and at Stone Barns, author of The Third Plate, just an amazing thought leader when it comes to food and our food supply in this country. And Dan is going through what every chef and restaurateur is going through in this moment of COVID-19. So I'm especially grateful, Dan, that you would just take a little bit of time to talk to us about how you're dealing with this and how it's impacted your thinking. So welcome to Add Passion and Stir.
Thanks very much. Nice to be here.
Dan, let's just start by how are you doing? How's your team? I'm sure this has been a wrenching 30 to 45 days. Just give us a sense of just what it's been like for you personally.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can add to what people have been reading out there as this being a moment of incredible loss and sadness. And what makes it most disconcerting is that in the midst of my own personal feeling of loss, there's just a tremendous amount of pain and anguish and emergency happening around us. So it feels minuscule compared to the more global world that we're living in right now. Nonetheless, it's definitely a game changer. We tried to pick up from that closure and start something new. So I've had my head stuck instead of in a wok, I've been sticking it in a production box to get this team, what's left of it anyway. We have about 30 of a 200 plus team left, and we're packing boxes day and night to make a go at this.
Wow. So you had, between your two restaurants, about 200 members of the team. And I guess like everybody else, 170 of them or so had to be at least furloughed or laid off.
Yeah.
And these are folks, I'm sure some of them are folks that have been with you for a long time.
Yes. Yeah. Very long. We've kept a core group, but the whole thing was like, it's that you as a chef, and I know this, or as a business person or anything, you work your life for, people forget, I think, or neglect to mention enough that part of what you're working towards is to work with the kind of people you want to work with. I mean, that's the right. I mean, that's the payoff. It's better than the money. It's like you get to hand select or self select, as it were, when you get to a certain level that is just more gratifying than anything that happens to me in the career. And so I got to this point just in the last couple of years, really. I mean, it's a late inning thing. It's as it is for most chefs, there it is. And I had, I have a team of 46 cooks and most of them from all over the world. And so to end that was to say goodbye to something that was a lifetime of work to build. Not to say that it couldn't come back, but to think along those lines right now just seems too much for me.
Wow. That's, we've actually talked to a number of chefs and restaurateurs over the last few weeks, and nobody has said it quite like that. That's such a poignant way to think about it. It's really moving to hear you talk about it, because that is, and I hadn't put words to that feeling before, but yeah, getting to the point where you are working with the folks you want to work with, and you've built your company and your culture, and you've had the luxury of being able to get the best people to come work with you, and to have that go away is, wow, yeah. That stings.
I know the night we closed, I had this dream. We've all had very vivid dreams over the last month or so, but I had a dream that I was a long haul trucker or driving in a long haul truck, and I just looked in the rearview mirror, and everything on the truck was emptying out on the highway, and I couldn't stop the truck. And then it's that everything that I had stacked into, to deliver into the future was now being unloaded. And once the gate of the trailer had been unlocked and let loose, that was it. And my cooks were all, at that moment, just immediately took flights back home. And I was just like, every email and text I was getting was like, I'm at the airport. I'm on a flight to Sao Paulo. I'm at the airport. I'm on a flight to Japan. Yeah. And so it's like, what? Wait a minute. I didn't mean for that to happen. And then, and that's gone. And it just, in the span of 24 hours, just boom. Anyway, so here we are.
And Dan, talk about the box that you mentioned. You've got a core staff left that's working on these boxes. What did you pivot to, and how's that working right now?
Yeah, well, the next so after I woke up from that dream, I got some pretty frantic texts and emails from not cooks but suppliers. They were farmers that I've worked with for 20 years, farmers that we've supported, farmers that we've grown up with, as one farmer put it to me. Talk about poignant, and they were like, well, my pigs at the slaughterhouse, or my greenhouse radishes are picked. It's not like you can turn that faucet off unless you just don't return the calls. So that's what launched this box program. We called it Resourced, because I didn't just want to be in the box business. I don't know what the hell, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, to be honest with you. It's like, it's a whole new, it's like telling a dentist to become a heart surgeon. It's like, I don't know how to do this. And so it was a desperate move, not a conscious plan. We just wanted to get these farmers some revenue and to deliver on the promise we had, which is like, we contract a lot of these guys and women over the years. And in many ways, we forced a lot of them to supply us 100%, because I'm like other chefs, I get really greedy for the stuff that I like. I don't want to share it with other chefs. So we commit to 100% of their farm or whatever they're growing. And then, it's not really right. I mean, it's definitely not right. There's no planetary system where it's right to say, see you later, because I had to try something. And so this is what we did. We went into the business of doing boxes. And like I said, I didn't want to just do delivery boxes because while there's a lot of pain going on around us, the mere amount that I can produce in a safe kitchen like ours is terribly small. And when I say in an environment like this, I mean, we have a very high protocol, which is 6 feet. Like, nobody can even cross somebody in the hallway. So we're very tight on how we operate, and I wanted that established right away. And so it just limits the amount of people that we can have in the kitchen at one time. We're at 3 shifts now. We do morning, afternoon, night, and we're packing these boxes, but we're doing it out of this idea of Resourced, which is the idea of the name of the company, but it's resource education. So it's resource with a capital ED at the end, and it's meant to convey, some sustenance of the moment and nutrition and flavor, of course, but more it's meant to convey the idea that there's a neural network of farmers that us, but also just anybody who loves to go out to eat is connected to too, whether you know it or not. And that network has been shattered. And the effects of that are something that I wanted to look into. So we started Resourced in part to do these boxes, in part to create a consciousness through education about the kind of people that produce our food and the kind of people we want producing our food. Let's put it that way. The kind of people who are diverse and mostly organic and responsive to soil health and nutrition, and therefore, great flavor. And so these are treasures, man. You did everyone says farmers are treasures, and they are. But these particular farmers are like the elites, they're the special forces, and for the environment and the ecology. And, you don't want to see that disappear. So I wanted to launch something where we would have some money, potentially raise some money through the nonprofit Stone Barns Center, who's our partner in this, to investigate, what is the landscape here? What does this look like for these farmers? I can tell you that they're in trouble, but that doesn't mean anything if I don't have data attached to it. So that just started like the second day in informal conversations I was having, driving from Stone Barns to Blue Hill Farm, which is my farm in Western Massachusetts, my family farm. And I just had 2 hours. And I was just calling around to farmers, and, what's going on? How does this look for you? And it was like listening to the greatest podcast you ever listened to. It was just amazingly interesting how some of these farmers overnight pivoted to retail sales when they didn't have it before, and some down the street couldn't find a retail market and were sitting there not knowing what to do. And then, it just was amazing all over the place. So then I just put some resources to it and raised a little bit of money to see if we can get this into some kind of form that raises awareness. And that's where we are today. We're at 120 farms, and we're headed to 120 farms with interviews and data. And what does this look for us? Come the summer when the harvest hits, if restaurants aren't at 50% of what they're doing now, which I think is conservative, because I don't think restaurants will be at even 50% in sales, and if farmers markets are at 50% of what they're doing, this time last year, which I think is conservative, because I don't think they're going to let people hoard. They're going to let people line up at farmers markets on a Saturday, 65,000 people at Union Square. That's not going to happen. So you put that together. Well, what's it look like for you, farmer? And the answer across the board. I mean, I'm not even talking like most of the times, like 95% of the respondents are like bankruptcy. That's it for us. And that's a catastrophe. That's you and I sitting on the shoreline watching a tsunami come in. And it's hard to talk about tsunamis that are coming because we're in the middle of one, as we speak. But this one is the kind of thing that you won't ever get back. I mean, we could bemoan what happened to restaurants and argue whether or not there's a culture here that's going to return. And that'd be an interesting conversation. But the conversation about these kind of farmers not returning, well, that's a generational disaster, and we don't want to have that happen, because we don't want to leave that to the next generation. That's something that we could avoid if we get awareness about it quickly, and we give these farmers the bridge in terms of money and in terms of awareness that can get them to the other side. And I just think that's probably the best thing that I can do in this moment, beyond the hospitals that we're feeding with these boxes and beyond the school kids we're feeding these boxes. I think this might be the most long-lasting thing that I can do if I can muster some attention towards it. So that's what I'm focused on.
But Dan, I was going to ask you, most of us have an image of farmers, but truth be told, most of us probably have never met one. Can you talk about a farmer? You have the privilege of knowing many of them. And as you're talking, I'm trying to get a picture of a farmer who's like, how much land does he or she farm? How long have they been at it? What's their life like? If there's somebody that you can tell us about, you probably know these folks intimately.
Yeah. I mean, there's a guy that comes to mind that really kickstarted my consciousness. I'm speaking like, this was a thought that came to my mind alone. It wasn't. It was the phone calls and texts that I got from the farmers about their deliveries. And the first one I got, I could mention many to you, of course, but the first one that comes to my mind is this guy, Evan Prophet. He's in northern Vermont, and he drives his pheasants down to us once a week. It's about a 4-hour drive, so he does an 8-hour round trip thing to deliver to us each week 50 pheasants. And these things, they're raised in an environment that is essentially wild. He's a very eccentric, brilliant young guy, and he used to hunt pheasants with his grandfather in Scotland or something. And, he always had the taste of that wild game. And he believed that you could mimic that through domesticated pheasants. And so that's what he set out to do. And he treats the pheasants like they're wild, but he has them in this big netted thing in his backyard, essentially. I mean, it's a farm, but it's, an acre or half an acre netted. And he plants this intense diversity of grains and grasses and pulses, and that the pheasant are eating as they fly up and down the netting of this acre. And they think they're wild, and they think they found Garden of Eden, so they're not trying to get out of the netting. If you remove the netting, they wouldn't go anywhere. But he has it just to keep out coyotes, actually. And what the pheasant do is they feel so comfortable and happy, and they're fed so well that they are spectacularly like you've never had a wild game like this in your life, and it's domesticated, so it's replicable. And the thing that I found so inspired about his thing is that it's a farm, domesticated farm. It's agriculture, but it's really mimicking nature, and that's the best kind of agriculture. It's the ones that we have a contract with nature where we try and disrupt how she works with the greatest attention and care. And when it comes to animals, but it's the same for vegetables or root vegetables, grains. I mean, you name it. The key component to raising really delicious food is to keep that ecological impact and that DNA of an animal intact. And that's what he's done. I just thought it's like I'm trying. We've just been working this out with him. He started really with a couple birds, and we helped grow the business, and we kept paying, incentivizing him to keep growing and giving all the birds, selling all the birds to us, but at a fantastic price. But I knew I knew what was going into it. Like, I wasn't there to make money. He was there to just basically break even. But we were working on trying to mimic this kind of system everywhere, and it's a great parable for what is important in any kind of farming. And I said, vegetable farming too. I mean, the best farmers we deal with are the ones that are mimicking nature and not using chemicals and allowing weeds to develop and allowing, rotations to increase soil health to give you the kind of food that really, gives you jaw-dropping flavor. So the same concept. And these were the farmers, these ones were the ones that I wanted to most protect, because they leave us a generation of knowledge leaves us, and I don't think they come back. So that's where my drive is.
And so, have you got pheasant in these boxes now?
Yeah, man. Each pheasant is like $90
Oh
in
my
cost.
God.
Once you break it down, it's like it's crazy. It's crazy. But I always felt like it was an investment in the future. I don't know where this thing was going to go, and we were along with him writing a script for other people to do it at a larger scale and with more efficiencies. You weren't driving 8 hours to drop it off. That kind of thing. And again, I felt like you could write something on this and use video to show how this kind of approach to animal agriculture is the way to be in the world. It's the same with beef. I mean, you take that principle and you just say, give a cow what it wants to eat, and it'll be happy and it'll fatten and it'll give you the kind of flavor steaks and hamburgers that we want, with the kind of nutrition that we want, without the laden fat and without the environmental impacts that our meat industry is so invested in destroying it. So it's all there, and then that's what's in this group of farmers, that kind of knowledge and practice, like boots on the ground doing it. It's not somebody like me just pontificating. It's them actually doing it and showing. They're like lighthouses. They show a way forward, and you keep those people disappear, you're cooked. So here we go.
Well, and as you talk about what you described as this kind of potential generational disaster, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, well, thank goodness Dan is doing this with Evan, but there's got to be thousands of Evans out there, and there aren't thousands of Dan Barbers, right?
No, in every region of this country, there's these people that chefs have. Chefs, to credit, it's not me. I'm lucky enough to have a few real bright stars in this group that I'm mentioning, but that's every chef has some connection with people like Evan, that in their own region, and stories to tell about it, that I don't think people are aware that those things that will disappear. Because, and I say that with confidence only because it was a funny thing. I don't know if we've ever done a survey before. I haven't, and I learned so much, because my first interviews, casual conversations with all these farmers, was like pretty bright, except for Evan. It was pretty bright. It was like they had pivoted to retail customers, and because people were hoarding, it was like 5x sales, and people couldn't keep, farmers couldn't keep stuff in stock, and it was at the a lot of cold storage stuff at the end of the year, and so it wasn't, it's not like immediate disaster, which is how the media sort of painted it. That's not right. The disaster is when you ask a follow-up question, which is what I got around to realizing, because nobody was recognizing that restaurants weren't returning. Not even chefs, not even me. I'm having trouble recognizing that. Like, we're not returning to what we were. And so to say that your restaurant sales down 50% and market's down 50% is not hyperbolic. I think that's reality. I think that's actually conservative. And if that's conservative, well, where does that put you, farmer? And then the answer is across the board. Well, I'd be bankrupt. But then there's a silence. There's like, well, do you actually think that's what's going to happen? Like, yeah, man, that is what's happening, and we're about to feel that. And if we don't act on it now, these people have no cash flow to deal with, and they won't take loans. And it's not, the culture is not to take a loan from the government. It's not like that. It's got to be immediate action, and it's actually an opportunity, I think, to develop a kind of system, of regional network anyway, that is more resilient. It's funny, Billy. It's like, if I had talked to you 2 months ago, you'd forgive me for saying that the farm to table network, the good food network, for which you've been a supporter and advocate for your whole career, and we all have been. I mean, it's where the best food comes from. But we would say, that's the way to think about the future of food. It's not these big mega farms. It's not industrial agriculture. All this stuff's going away. And what we're looking at is a future where, there's a direct connection with the farmer. Then comes COVID, and what it reveals, as it reveals so brilliantly, is weaknesses, and it did not spare farm to table. The thing that that the good food movement hung its hat on was the direct connection. You shake the hand of the farmer that grew your food, and that's the strongest chain possible in a food chain. Well, it turns out that's not right. Where it's actually exquisitely vulnerable, because you actually can't shake the hand of the farmer because you're going to get a virus. So you have to, that whole chain gets broken down overnight. And that shows you that the answer to the future is not as simple as we might have imagined. And what I come away with is what I sit in the middle of every day, which is, I looked around yesterday in the afternoon and I was like, I'm not a chef anymore. I'm a food processor. That's what I do. I over here is the guy who's taking the ramps from this morning and he's fermenting them and pickling them. And over there is the guy who's breaking down one of those grass-fed beef animals I was talking about. We're gonna make some charcuterie. We're gonna make some sausage. We're gonna cure and smoke and dry and also make some fresh cuts. And over there's a person, doing milk from Blue Hill Farm that we're going to make into these quick cheeses. I mean, every 360 around me, I'm a food processor. But I shouldn't be the food processor. We should have regional food processing. We should have these people who we should be investing in the kind of infrastructure that takes great food like the one from Eben, our pheasant guy, and all the others, and turns it into the kind of food processing that adds value, nutrition, deliciousness, and revenue. In our conception, westernized or American conception of food processing, is that it strips and denudes and denatures and denutrifies and makes something not only not delicious but unpalatable. But that doesn't have to be that way. That's an American understanding of food processing. We need to return to what cultures and civilizations figured out for thousands of years, which is fermenting and pickling and milling and all the other processes, malting and distilling, all those things that bring the farmer's value into the system. And it also is resilient. It's a little inefficient because you don't have some big hog dude in the Midwest milling your grains for you into white flour. That's true. So it's going to be more expensive, but it's resilient in the sense that the next time a shock or a pandemic or whatever hits us, there's resiliency in the system to soak up that shock. And right now, even the farm to table movement in its simple chain is at a loss.
So Dan, what you're talking about there when you say I'm not a chef anymore, I'm a food processor, obviously a very provocative statement. And I'd read another provocative statement of yours in, I guess, Time Magazine a week or so ago. And you were talking about what I think of as, I guess the potentially even darker side of this is, I think you said, big food was on the ropes and now big food is back in terms of the kind of processed big food that, we always thought farm to table was going to compensate for. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, I was just talking to a food executive this morning. I mean, the guy was just like, he was like, we're in it again. And a month ago, just as I said, we wouldn't have been faulted for saying farm to table was the future. Well, you would have said the big ag, big food person was on the decline. I mean, all the numbers were pointing to the end of big food as we know it anyway. That's not means they totally disappear, but there was a bifurcation. There was a turning of the back in the aisles on the anything that was processed and multiple ingredients, and food without a story, food without, people were just getting too smart. And the trend was following the organic trend. It was just growing. And, that was very emboldening to the people who were leading that movement. And my argument is the chefs were kickstarting that. And we're the real, progenitors of the farm to table movement. But what's happened here just in the last month is that the big food industry is doing really well with sales, as we know, but they're also digging in, and they have the cash, the resilience themselves to dig in. And what he said to me, which scared the bejesus out of me, was like, we're not going to screw this up again. We're going to make sure that this generation doesn't let go of the kind of food that is cheap, easy, and efficient. And what are you going to say to that? The guy's so off the mark, but he's not an idiot, and he may not make a delicious dinner. You might not want to have dinner with him, but he's smart, and what he's basically saying is this is the comeback moment, and executives and food companies are salivating at this moment because it's not just the moment of people in their homes, which is definitely trending towards helping them. It's also a lot of people are cooking more, so it's a mixed bag. But it's how do you, when you come out of this in a depression, which it looks like we're headed towards really fast, but also a culture around food where cleanliness is going to be imbued, I think, into the food culture. How safe is it? How, even though COVID, of course, has nothing to do with foodborne illnesses or anything, and that's been proven over and over again. It doesn't matter. It's how people feel, and if people feel that going to a restaurant is going to be a little less safe because of distancing, but also because of food preparation, the people in the kitchen, all the people have been getting sick, then it's packaged food and supposedly clean food that's going to end up winning the day. And that could last years. It could last a generation. And that's the scary, that there, right there, that's scary. So I think, it's a moment to dig in, to defend, and I keep saying it's like a refugia moment for these cooks who are, where we talk, still have a cook meeting twice a week. We used to have one every day for an hour with the cooks. But we do it twice a week now. And I keep saying the same thing. This is the moment to fight back. And there are many ways to do that are quiet. And for one way is as Michael Pollan has said, you vote with your fork 3 times a day. And that's exactly right. It's a very powerful vote. And we all need to stand up in the middle of this moment to protect and defend what we've built, we being the industry, but we being anybody who cares about good food.
You've kind of laid down a challenge for all of us when you say you vote with your fork 3 times a day, or quote Michael Pollan saying that. And I think, it drives home for me that we're all constantly making decisions and choices that matter. And it's so easy to forget that. But a time like this, I think, brings that into, I guess, sharper relief. You talked about your dream, kind of a nightmare, looking through the rearview mirror of that tractor trailer with, things going off the back of it. When you dream forward a little bit to what it might be like when your restaurants reopen, is that vision starting to crystallize at all? Is it still a completely blank slate? How does somebody like you think about it? Because I know you think hard about these things.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what we're going to be facing next week, and so I don't know what we're going to face next month. And I'm more interested not so much on when they lift the restriction, but what is the mood of the country? Because restaurants, as some restaurants can just turn the key and start back up again and get a workforce, and you can do it. A lot of us cannot do that. Because we're built on our supply chain, for one. So that's why I'm so nervous about the supply chain, but also just the institutional knowledge of what we're doing is now left to me for the most part. Again, we have the core group, so it's not dystopian. I have some positive thoughts, but maybe it's a moment to rethink what a restaurant does. And if you're going to ask me, well, what do you mean by that? We got to check in a month or 2 or 3 or whenever we go into this. And I like the idea of traffic and transit and doing this as I'm going along instead of trying to think in a corner. And that's what the box became. I didn't think the box was going to be a business. It's a business. It's like getting to be kind of a big business under the circumstances of a COVID, meaning we're really limited. If we weren't limited with spacing, we could be doing a lot. And the demand's really there. And the demand for the farmers is, for our customers, really there. So it's all there. And I think, we could continue to grow this. I don't want to be in the box business. I'm not saying that's where my future is, but there's something here, and maybe we'll see what this moment looks like and take a temperature. But I don't think returning to the paradigm of where we were just a month ago is the right way to reopen a restaurant. And maybe the restaurant needs to look different. Maybe it needs to have a different kind of purpose in the moment. But I'd like to explore that, and I'm excited to do that. I'm upset and depressed, but I'm also excited because there's a part of it that, could be culture affirming, as our cultural institutions, museums and theaters and everything else is at such a loss and will be for a long time. I loop restaurants in there, as I'm sure you do. They're cultural imprints, and they've taken over the cultural fabric of communities for many years now. And maybe we have a role to play that is actually more exciting and more imperative for the future than we would have imagined. So I'd like to keep that option open.
One last thing I'd like to ask you about, and it relates to when you quote Michael Pollan saying, we vote with our fork 3 times a day. These are choices we can make. What about one of the things that obviously has come out in the whole COVID period is, what's the role of government? And when you think about supply chain, when you think about how we fix some of the places where the supply chain is breaking, is there stuff that we should know as citizens, as voters, in terms of what we should expect our government to be doing, policies that are right and wrong that we should be advocating for?
Yeah, I mean, the policies around food, as you know, are miserable in the sense that they support and encourage the wrong kinds of things. The main thing is obviously the biggest swath of that is how we feed a cow, because we're talking about 160 million acres of corn and soybeans that mostly go to feed animals and not feed us. And that's like the most inefficient use of resources in the history of humanity. And one of the most destructive ones for the cow itself, for the soil, and for our health all around. It's a utter disaster. And that we pay for that with our tax dollars. We support that. We pay for it. We prop it up. We make it happen. And so, if you could come out of this awareness moment where we have time to think about our relationship with food, maybe in a way that we didn't a month ago, you come out of it with that sense of power. That's why I like the Michael Pollan quote so much, because it's empowering and it's so true. We vote for our politicians, once a year or once every 4 years, our president. Well, hell, man, we vote 3 times a day. And if we're conscious about it and willing to spend a little bit extra, willing to go to the trouble of going out of our way, will affect change more than policy from up high. I think this is bottom up. We love movements that are bottom up, and this is bottom up because it's so detailed in the every meal counts towards a vote, and that it's but at the same time, it's like around the world thing. It's top down too. That's why restaurants are so important, because restaurants set a culture, and as what's to me is the most destructive of this moment is that it destroyed this culture of this connection to farms and where your food comes from, and the kinds of things that chefs just trumpeted, and to make us look like better chefs because we're better flavors for. There's no question about it. It was good for us, but that kind of thing getting lost, and I don't know that that's going to come back with the kind of flair that it had. And as we were saying to that food executive, I talked to him a month ago. He was looking at his retirement. He's now looking at investing, and that's a world change that. I hope doesn't stick. So, man, we'll talk again and see where we are in a couple of months, and hopefully have a less dystopian outlook than I've presented to you and your listeners.
Yeah, well, I think we're all hoping and thinking it's got to get better. I was talking to a friend yesterday named Julia Rubin, who works on sex trafficking issues, and particularly as it applies to the degree to which that's either supported or not supported, and child labor, I should say, as well, by our kind of our corporate supply chains. And she said, similar version of what you said, every time we open our wallet, we vote for the world that we want. And it's the same thing. We've got to really recognize the responsibility we have when we make these choices. Well, I got to let you go because you've got a little girl that's got to learn to ride a bike by Sunday, and that's important. And she's counting on you. And I'd say the rest of us are counting on you to help us think through and be a guide as events unfold as to what kind of world we want to have in terms of our food and our farms.
Well, thank you. You've done so much to, inspire a generation of chefs around good work and the advocacy and the role that we can play outside of the 4 walls of a kitchen. So I thank you for that. And let's work together to see a future that, our kids can really shine in.
Well, thank you, Dan. We've been talking to Dan Barber, Blue Hill at Stone Barns, and also the author of a really important book called The Third Plate. It's really a pleasure to talk to you, Dan, even under these difficult circumstances. I'm so grateful for you taking the time. I'm Billy Shore. You've been listening to Add Passion and Stir. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
I'm Billy Shore. You've been listening to Add Passion and Stir. You can go to our website, addpassionandstir.com, and find our other episodes, and you can rate us and rank us and share this conversation with others. Thanks to the team at Share Our Strength and the No Kid Hungry campaign, and our producer at District Productive, Paul Woody, for making this possible. Add Passion and Stir is distributed by District Productive. Our executive producer is Peter Ogburn. Add Passion and Stir is the creation of Billy Shore, Debbie Shore, and Paul Woody Woodhull.